Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about going green and about what that means to companies. At least one major survey said that sustainability is really moving up the management agenda for SMEs. Something like a third of SMEs said sustainable strategy is absolutely put on their agenda right now, and a further 23% are intending to develop their strategy over the next few years. So I think SMEs are getting it, that there is a really good formula of planet plus people, which doesn't have to exclude profit. In fact, green markets are increasingly important to SMEs. There was a survey on eco-innovation, and something like 48% of SMEs cited market demand as their main motive to get into green products. So there's a business to grow, and it's growing green. Some SMEs are focusing on reducing their environmental footprint in terms of their production, and others are focusing on green outputs, green products and services, renewable energy products. These are all absolutely on the agenda for many SMEs. So it's kind of a growing goal, but there are still barriers, and there's still barriers for lots of people. People still struggle with what we mean by sustainability. Are we talking about carbon reduction, recycling? Is it about planting trees or planting the seeds of new behaviors in younger people? Or is it all of those things? And how do you do that? For many people, the idea of climate change affects somewhere else. So it's like the polar ice caps melting or the forests of the Amazon. But what does it mean to me, and how does it affect my local environment? And finally, there are still a lot of business people who think that environmental stability is incompatible with good business because it costs money to go green. So how do SMEs get on board with the program that recognizes there's no plan B for the planet? Well, Kate Stinchcombe-Gillies is a communications consultant and a B4 member who's been looking at engaging SMEs in going green with her company, Coconut PR. She's joined me here today. And Kate, it's really good to have you here. Let me start by asking you personally how you became so invested in the idea of green and sustainability.
Well, hello, Frank. Thank you for that introduction. I think personally, and it's very small steps. So I think I've been very conscious of the kind of car that I drive. I've been very conscious around recycling. I live in a rural part of Oxfordshire, surrounded by trees. So I'm very conscious about what trees in my garden do what as far as absorbing carbon from the atmosphere goes. But it was about, and I've lost track of time, pre-COVID, the last time I was in New Zealand, and my sister-in-law cooked Christmas lunch for 16 of us, and everything besides the meat came out of her garden. And that was a big penny drop moment for me. I was like, hold on a second, somebody can do that. And it's not just for today. She fed us the night before and she'll feed us the day after. And I know she's consistently feeding her family like this. So when we came home, got some beds built. And I also stopped buying detergent and the like off the shelf in the supermarket. So I started taking the containers I had already to, so we're near Wallingford, so there's a shop called Just Trading in Wallingford, and I could refill using better for the environment produced detergents. I don't know what they're called, but you know what I mean. And not for any significantly greater cost. And then I started doing the same thing with my dry goods, so pasta, dried fruits, that kind of thing. Stopped buying it off the shelf in the supermarket, started refilling my own containers. And it's tiny little steps. And I think it's that realization that we are not all able to do big things. And whether we are an individual or a small business, we can do small things. And as long as we're all doing small things, cumulatively, it will start to make a difference. And yes, arguably, the bigger the business you are, the more chance you've got of reaching more people with the message. But if you're not extolling the message in some way, you're not going to reach anybody with it.
Like you, we've started a little market garden at the back of our garden, and we've seen loads of vegetables growing, and it's been really fantastic to watch that, but also to know that we don't need to source that food anywhere else. And it's a great thing. But let me ask you, you like me are from the communications industry. It's what we do. And what we do is we help people to form ideas and arguments and communicate those to their key stakeholders. So you've been working with companies locally. You have a range of clients in Coconut PR. What advice are you giving to those companies about how to engage their customers on sustainability and social responsibility and the values and practices that they need to make evident through all their communications?
So ultimately, and I don't want this to sound as cliched as I fear it might, it has to come from the heart. So, whether you're a one-man band or a 5,000 people wagon of people, you have to set your sustainability stake in the ground, in the smack bang in the middle of your business. Decide what it is that it means to you and your business. Decide what changes you and your business can make, how that will impact but also benefit your staff, how they can get involved. Make it a constant theme of conversation internally, and then you're in an empowered place to start talking about it externally so that you can start contributing to more positively to that conversation in your customers' minds and their lives. And, I'm quite fortunate in that I've got some clients for whom sustainability is at the very heart of their business. It's the reason they exist. It's why they started. But for others, they have come to me partway along their journey and said, we need to do something. What do we do? This is what I think matters. This is what this person over here thinks matters. How do we gel it all together? And how do we have some positive knock-on effect for customers? But the overriding message with all of them is, whatever we do, please don't make it look like greenwashing. And you've probably heard that phrase. I'm not sure if everybody has, but it's this art of making it look like you're doing something positive for the environment where actually you're just not, or you're just skimming the surface or dipping a toe. And more recently, I've also heard it referred to as purpose washing. So my advice is, figure out what it is that you can do and why it matters to your business. Because once you've nailed that, it will be far easier to communicate to your customers. And if you can understand what it means to your customers and how they weave it into their own businesses or lives, it becomes a two-way conversation. So if you can do something as a business, whether that's offsetting your carbon, or if you can do something with the service or product that you provide that enables the end user to also be more sustainable in their actions as a result of being your customer.
I think that's great advice. I think it's so important as well that companies engage all their stakeholders in the conversation, especially their employees. I'll tell you, in Unipart, we held a Green Friday a couple of weeks ago in line with World Environment Day. And what we did was basically to challenge all our employees in their teams to just take an hour out and have a discussion and use some problem-solving tools about looking at where they could make improvements in what they did in terms of sustainability. And it was very broad. The topic was very broad. Could you save paper? Could you save electricity? Could you reduce water usage? Could you reduce transport? What were the things you could look at that could make a difference? What were the things you could do that might impact biodiversity? So we made it very broad and let people be creative. Do you know, we now have recorded something like over 600 suggestions that have come forward from teams in different sites across the UK. And they're being reviewed with a view to implementing as many as we can and as quickly as we can against our target, which is to be able to significantly reduce CO2 across the business, ultimately to get to a stage of eliminating it completely. And that requires us to measure, monitor, and continually review the stuff we're doing and keep it on the agenda of the company and keep it on people's personal agenda, because it's something just like our COVID secure practices we want people to take home. We want them to think about in their lives and look at their own lives and think about, well, what could we change in our households? Because this is something we're all invested in. This is something that matters to us, not just at work, but of course, in everything we do. I'm really pleased to say that one of my colleagues has developed a system which we're implementing through the company that lets every site look at the key measurements around the amount of energy they use, the amount of water they use, and some of the other key things that affect the sustainability on site. So they'll get a very clear picture of what they do there. It would be great to know what we do in our homes. And the stuff you talked about, Kate, about refilling, used washing powder or washing liquid, so you're using the same bottle. I mean, that's great stuff, and that's really inspirational. And I was really pleased to see people like Waitrose introduce that some time ago. I'm not sure what's happened with that pilot, but it's a great thing for people to do. So let me ask you, Kate, you've been in the network, the B4 network, a long time, as I have. We've both been members. What do you think an organization like B4 can do to help members learn about sustainability and how they can change their businesses?
Well, this conversation is a great start. And I think the very first question would be to ask members what they're doing. What are B4 members already doing to take their businesses down a path of sustainability? And on that point, I'm also going to reference that it doesn't have to just be sustainability. As you touched on earlier on, it's such a broad spectrum of things under that umbrella that environment is a big piece, but environments can stretch into community projects too. So for example, I have a client who said, no, I'm not setting a sustainability strategy, I'm setting a social responsibility strategy, because we know that we need to have an impact on the environment positively, but we know that our clients might already be running environmentally friendly businesses, and they are therefore now contributing to other community development projects. So don't get too hung up on that word would be my first point, I suppose. Then start communicating, asking members what you're doing, what they're doing. Find out more, become part of their communications. And your point about measurement is really, really important, because that feeds into the communication piece. Not only does it help a business figure out where they're at and how they're doing, it also becomes an accountability piece in terms of communicating to the audience and updating them and getting them excited about, the positive steps that we can all take. So if members are taking these positive steps already, they're recording things already, they're reporting on them already, let B4 know. And the more of us that are talking about it, ultimately, the more influence we will have across Oxfordshire and across our wider networks as a whole.
Absolutely. Rich has just put a message out there to all our members that if you're doing things, please let us know, share with the network the sorts of things that you're doing. And I got to say, that's actually kind of a national trend I see emerging. Early days, but starting in a number of networks. I'm fortunate enough to be in a group of business people who are ambassadors for responsible business on behalf of His Royal Highness Prince of Wales, who, as you can imagine, is very, very focused on environmental issues. But I'm seeing that every time we get together, one of the things that occurs is people sharing stories and telling stories about what's going on in their regions and what companies are doing. And that idea of sharing good practice, sharing information, and by sharing, inspiring others to do things, I think is so important, because when you see someone else doing something and when they tell you, well, this is what we're doing and this is how we're doing it, and let me give you some details about the benefits that we got from that, you kind of step back and go, well, why can't I do that? That's something I could do in my business, whether I'm a large business or a small business or a micro business. It's maybe something I could pick up. So I think you're absolutely right. B4 has such a tremendous role to play. And I'm glad to say we've got kind of a sustainability environmental hub developing. I think there's so much we could do in just sharing good information with our colleagues in a structured way, through the website, through videos like this, and through webinars we can run. It's a great opportunity for B4, and we're in a really important place to do it because, as you know, the B4 members are the best businesses in Oxfordshire, and we're really glad to have you all with us. So finally, Kate, you've got a young family, and I know that's that's both a fantastic place to be, having had a young family myself that's now grown up and left, but it's also very taxing when you're running a business and thinking about how you run your business, saving time, doing things easily, managing your family. It's a busy life. So what really drove you to think about climate change, not just in your business, but in your life? And how much has your family impacted that? How do you talk to them about it?
I think it goes back to my early story, which is, we've got family on the other side of the world. So I know that long haul travel is probably the worst thing that you can do, but I'm not going to stop once I'm allowed to get back into the country. So how we have to offset that in some respects. And I could do it by offsetting it by, my carbon of my flight, by planting trees. I could donate regularly to particular causes, or I could just, in everyday life, educate my kids on ways to live more sustainably, which is, the way that all the things I touched on before. But just last night, when I'd finished my day, I grabbed my boys and I said, come on, I got something to show you in the veg patch. Take them down. And, kids and vegetables, they're Marmite, aren't they? They either love them or they hate them. Show my kids fresh peas growing on the pod, they're gone in seconds. They plant them, they grow, they eat them. That's the way to live for the future to some extent. And it's about making them realize that there are lots of different ways to live your life without doing so in a way that damages the planet. They watch David Attenborough, they understand that the ice caps are melting. They watch Blue Peter, they watch Newsround. Fortunately, school's very good at putting them in front of these kinds of topics in a way that is absorbable by younger minds. So it's quite often a part of the conversation at home, and we do our best to make it a viable future for them and for the planet. But it's small steps, and small steps that we can all take.
It is small steps. I love the fact that Helen just texted us and said that her kids have been making reusable masks and reusable plastic bottles and selling them. That's the one now, selling them for charity, which is a great thing. I think it's great that kids really get involved and are thinking about it, because they will be a huge lever. And that point about travel is so well made, Kate. Like you, I have family abroad, I have family in the States, and it's so difficult not to be able to travel to see them at least once a year. It's once a year seems not a lot. But even now, we haven't seen them in several years. But I gotta say, the technology is opening up great opportunities for us to talk almost face to face. It's almost like being in a room. And I'm able to talk to my 90-year-old mother, who can't always hear, but nonetheless, at least I can see her and she can see me. And it bridges some of that gap, even locally, where we haven't been doing much traveling, and certainly saved a huge amount on our fuel in the car because we've been going nowhere. Being able to connect online like this is such a powerful way. And I watch my grandson, who's just over 1 year old, and he actually has grasped the whole idea of Skyping and knows when the music comes on, somebody's calling and responds to it. And I just see that whole generation probably looking at connecting in a very different way than maybe we have, and using these tools more effectively, which to some extent are going to be helpful in the environment, but they are still using a degree of energy, and they're not wholly the answer, but they are an answer. They're one way of doing it. And I guess you must have seen that with your own kids, Kate, and how they responded to the whole thing about not being able to get to school and how that's impacted them during the pandemic.
Yeah, I think it's been a very challenging year socially for everybody, but for kids who are so used to just being close to each other, seeing children be afraid to get close, because particularly, this time a year ago, everybody had been told to stay away from each other. It was really quite sad. But they adapt, kids adapt faster than we do. Change is less impactful on them than it is on us. And they will come out of it stronger. And to Helen's point about the masks, one of the things that my kids did similar to that, and I know other people have done similar projects too, they harvested the seeds from last year's sunflowers, dried them off, and this year raided my plant pots and planted them all, and then sold them on again for charity. And they chose a health charity because they were said, it's all part of the cycle. If the bees are healthy and they're enjoying the sunflowers, then we have to look after our own health. So we're going to invest the earnings in a British Heart Foundation. So they surprise me and delight me as much as infuriate me. It's nice to see that wildlife and the outdoors is very much a part of their life. And in some respects, one of the positives of the last year is that the outdoors has become even more so a part of their lives, because the garden was their haven.
And that's going to make the whole idea of protecting our environment, being part of our environment, I think, so much more relevant to that generation, who hopefully will, as you said, they adapted to COVID, will adapt to thinking about being more sustainable in everything they do, and about the resources that they use and the way they use them, and the things they can do to put something back into the environment. So, I mean, in many ways, it's a great thing that we can encourage our younger generations to do that. But we also have to be authentic in, I guess, changing our own behaviors and making sure that the things we do in business reflect that, and that our companies are thinking hard about how they can play a role and they can provide that leadership to families and young people as well in the stuff that they do.
So on that, if I could, there's Fleischmann Hillard, who are a big global PR agency. They do this authenticity gap report, and the last data that I've seen is from their 2019 report, and it's around consumer perception. And they've surveyed hundreds of people around the world, and the stats said something like 51% of consumers assess a brand based on their expectations of the service or product and whether or not it delivers on it. But the other 49% are also looking at what that business does, how it behaves, who its leaders are, what it's doing to make an impact beyond making a profit and selling its wares. And I think that is a really powerful takeaway to your point there, Frank, that what you do as a business and how you do it is as important as what you are selling and how much you have got on your bottom line.
Absolutely. Spin doctors like you and me are good at telling stories and making sure that we deal with, if you like, the reputation of businesses. But that reputation, that the things we do can only go so far, and a company has got to act its way into earning a reputation. I think those messages are so important. As communicators, I guess it is a key message that we continually put across to all our clients and our employers about the fact that we can tell a good story, but it's got to be based in fact, and it's got to be real, it's got to be authentic and built into the strategy of the organization and the commitment. Really well made point. Kate, I think we're just about out of time. Just one last message to your colleagues in the network.
Sustainability, social responsibility, whichever track you go down, is accessible for all. So just start thinking about it.